words today for Sunday, September the 1st, are abundant living. Let's say our affirmation together.
I live joyously and abundantly.
Living abundantly means living in gratitude without fear or limitation. It is living with an awareness of my divine nature as an expression of light, life, love, and peace. In a spirit of gratitude, I notice the blessings that flow into my life every day. I give thanks for each one, large or small, knowing I have all I need. With God as my source, I have unlimited resources that I can summon from within at any time. I see beyond any negative appearance to the truth of my being. I am whole, complete, and able. My relationships are harmonious. My life is in order. I have enough to use and to share. For these truths, I breathe a prayer of thanks. Abundance is all around me. And from Luke 6:45, the good person out of the good treasure of the heart produces good.
Here's something you're not going to hear every week.
No.
Unless you buy the CD. Is that enough? Oh, I lived a life of never known. I was always left to guess. I said I lived a life of never known, where I was always left to guess. But there's one thing wrong with never know. Never know is never yes. Oh, I walked between the highs and lows of life, and I never took a chance. I said I walked between the highs and lows of life, and I never really took a chance. You know, I always felt the music, but I never stopped to dance. So no excuses this time. I'm gonna buckle up and take the ride. no excuses this time. I'm gonna buckle up and take that ride. You know there ain't no game without the pain. Ain't gonna run away no more and hide. So this is a song I wrote when I was about 15. I didn't know it at the time. It was just a little verse at the time. Lived a life of never know, I'm always left to guess. There's one thing wrong with never know. Never know is never yes. It took about 35 years for the rest of the song to come together. I didn't know I was a songwriter at the time. But that's what this song is all about. It's about stepping into your truth and who you are. Because we're all placed here to do something special and to be someone special. To do something with our lives that touches another life, touches another heart, and gives something special to this world. So you know what to do. Go out and do it. So I'm done with that life of never know, where I was always left to guess. I said I'm done with that life of never know, where I was always left to guess. I want you to say yes at the end with me. Ain't gonna live that life of never know no more. This time, I'm saying yes. I'm saying yes. I'm saying yes. Say yes with me, my son. Say yes. Yes. Say yes with me. Come on now. Yes. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Daniel. We had such a wonderful time last night at your great concert. I'm already trying to book him again for the spring, so yeah, getting on the list. So thank you for being here. So these days, we are continually reeling from one horrible act of violence after another, one lie after another, one scandal after another, one embarrassment after the other, attacks on our democracy from within and without, fears of financial insecurity, all under the specter of a reactivated Cold War. Everywhere, people are struggling to stay balanced and maintain life as usual. Most of us have given up trying to make sense of it all. Some of you are like me, determined to hold on to the idea that this escalation of chaos is evidence that we are in the midst of radical change. That the opportunity now exists for a worldwide leap in consciousness. How so? Well, for one thing, much less of that dark stuff is under the carpet. It's out there for us all to see. And there seems to be a greater degree of self-examination than I remember among people in the past. Oh yeah, there's the usual blame and finger pointing, but there is also more conversation and reflection. We are paying attention. We are asking, what is ours to do? We may even be ready to hold unscrupulous people accountable. Thanks to the intelligence from responsible, alert young people, law enforcement has recently been able to block several mass attacks while they were still in the planning stage. More and more of us are determined to use our power as citizens to demand bright, intelligent, principled leaders who will take right action. So this is a wonderful time for us to dive into a series on Unity's foundational principles. Of course, we'll start with principle number 1. God, absolute good and unconditional love, is the one constant presence and power in our lives and in the world. I believe it is incredibly important that we as a Unity congregation consciously affirm this idea every single day. I know you think you already know the foundational principles of Unity. Well, you do. We all do. To a certain depth of understanding. Perhaps this morning we can take that understanding just a little deeper. Even more importantly, perhaps we can see why we ought to bother. I still remember when our homiletics teacher in seminary told us that the most important question to ask ourselves when assessing our Sunday message was, so what? Why does this matter? We repeat Unity principles at the beginning of every Sunday service. We affirm some of the spiritual gifts inherent in them: faith, self-esteem, personal empowerment, guidance, integrity. Faith, self-esteem, personal empowerment, guidance, integrity. Within these ideas lay the possibility of a whole new world, both within us and without. You and I know that we will never be able to solve the world's problems with the same consciousness that created them. We cannot possibly cure every mentally or physically ill person, jail every violent criminal, house every homeless person, or feed every hungry person. Working at that level, we will soon find ourselves demoralized and anxious and exhausted. And the real possibility even exists that the more we focus solely on short-term solutions without examining the root causes, the more the door remains open for more justice, violence, corruption, and suffering. Now, this doesn't mean we shouldn't feed the hungry person who comes to our door. But it does mean that chasing symptoms is at best ineffective and at worst enabling. Ultimately, the answer resides in a change of heart. Just as a crisis in our individual lives has the potential to move us to a new level of awareness, so a crisis in our collective experience offers the same possibility. We receive a wake-up call, and to the extent that we are able to work with it in our hearts, we are moved by it, away from apathy and cynicism, and toward a higher vision and a deeper commitment to wholeness. Wholeness. That's a word we talk about a lot in Unity. But how are we to define it? Gary Simmons, in his book, The Eye of the Storm, says that wholeness has 3 components. The ability to stay present to our experience in the heart, the deep inner knowing that our presence matters, and the willingness to be the way of God. We live in a culture that tends to break things up into parts. We analyze every event or situation to the point of exhaustion. We seem to believe that if we could understand exactly what happened, how it happened, and who's to blame, we'll all be safe. Of course, that's never worked before, but perhaps, just maybe, analysis will reveal a way that we can control the next time. And it's like personal work or therapy. For years, I thought if I understood my childhood, I would be healed in it. So I spent upteen hours and dollars analyzing and dissecting every detail. The result? I gained greater self-knowledge and compassion. Really good outcomes. But even more important than these was the realization that self-knowledge, even compassion, were not enough to heal me. Psychologically, I was much more grounded and present, yet for some reason, I was still suffering. Why was this? What was going on? Looking back, I see that these questions were gateways to the spiritual journey that continues to this day. One of the things I learned in therapy was that obsessive analysis is a strategy to avoid feeling. Unconsciously, we try to stay busy in the mind in order to keep feelings like anger and sadness and vulnerability and grief at bay. We fear that if we allow those feelings to come up, we might dissolve into a puddle of tears. We might not be able to go about our lives as usual. But what if crisis is meant to turn us in a new direction, to interrupt life as usual? What I discovered is that suppressing honest emotion will keep us stuck right where we are. Traditional medicine tends to treat our bodies as a conglomeration of separate parts too, which leads to the common situation of people taking 9, 10, or a dozen medications, some to treat the condition and others to treat the side effects of the other medications. You know what I'm saying? The overall impact of all these chemicals on the body, mind, emotion, and spirit, well, no one really knows. What we do know is that the rate of addiction to pain medications, antidepressants, and anti-anxiety medications is through the roof, and so is suicide. When we view life events, or even conditions in our own bodies, as singular situations, unconnected to any sort of continuum or greater whole, we get deeply frightened. Life feels overwhelming and random and dangerous. The result is a feeling of powerlessness which we desperately try to numb out, some through passive or active acts of violence toward themselves or others. To develop trust in the presence and power of absolute good and unconditional love, we need to experience what happens when we do not push life away. Even the parts that scare us, sadden us, or make us angry. Because only by taking every situation and feeling all of it into our embrace can we ever break through into the realization that beneath it all, wholeness exists. In ourselves, in our lives, and in the world. Unity's first principle, when integrated, establishes a platform of faith in the power of love, belief in divine order, and trust that goodness will ultimately prevail. This bedrock is what gives us the courage to be fully present to our lives and our world. The first principle assures us that wholeness exists beneath the level of any partial view or individual situation. Wholeness is the truth of things that we can only know by taking the experiences and conditions of life into our hearts and residing with them in the stillness until realization of their wholeness sifts down and settles in our bones. No one will ever be able to convince any of us that this wholeness exists, that there is order, beauty, perfection in the events of this world. But in the center of our being, beneath all those confusing and messy feelings and analytical thoughts, there is a place that senses the presence of infinite, eternal, abiding good. Trust in this inner sense of truth, rather than the isolated events of the world or other people's perceptions, will literally transform our lives. We will experience what it means to make a difference, because instead of adding our own fear and anger to the world's pain, we'll carry the presence of wholeness right into the midst of the apparent chaos. We won't have to struggle to fix things, because our very presence will help to transform them. Simmons puts it in a simple but profound way. Instead of being in the way of God, we become the way of God. We're the way of God when we show up to life deeply aware of our own perfection and beauty, and centered in the conviction that every event that happens is moving us and the world toward greater wholeness. We are the way of God when we know that people are not separate and unconnected, that what happens to kids in Russia or China or Mexico happens to our children too, because it is creating the world they will inherit. We are the way of God when we understand that events are not isolated, but are part of an evolutionary process that is moving us somewhere. The only way the world will transform is through the power of this consciousness. I truly believe that every time there is yet another incidence of terrible injustice or violence, we wake up just a little bit more. We see what we need to change. We sense the urgency, and we arouse from our denial. Some say this is an overly optimistic view. But then unity folks have often been accused of wearing rose-colored glasses, haven't we? To that point, I'd like to digress a moment into a story about a guy named Joe who died and went to hell. One of the devil's representatives, let's call him Spike, met Joe when he arrived and started out by taking him on a tour of the place. In the first room, there was a man wearing a clerical collar and sitting at a dinner table looking absolutely miserable. The table was loaded down with fish of all kinds. There was nothing else to eat but fish. "Wow," said Joe, "what in the world did he do to deserve this?" "Catholic priest," said Spike, "ate meat on Fridays." It's awful. The next room was a dark hole of a place, extremely dirty and poor, and a woman who was also wearing a clerical collar was seated at a rough wooden chair, looking very unhappy. "What did she do?" asked Joe. "She's an Episcopalian priest," Spike answered. "She spent all the church's money on expensive art to hang in the church and gave almost nothing to the poor. Very sad." In the third room, there were no furnishings at all. Only a man sitting on a cushion in the middle of the room with his eyes closed and a serene smile on his face, chanting softly. "What is he saying?" asked Joe. "Oh, he's a unity minister. He's been muttering like that for weeks. He's saying, 'I'm not here and it's not hot.' I'm not here. It's not hot." But the first unity principle is not a denial that people sometimes do evil things that cause terrible pain to others. It is the assurance that God is more powerful than evil. that good is present even in the midst of suffering, and that all of our experiences, both the wonderful ones and the painful ones, are catalysts for transformation. It is a statement of faith in the pull of spiritual evolution that is always moving the world toward higher consciousness. Listen to this beautiful excerpt from Christopher Fry's A Sleep of Prisoners. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries breaks, cracks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the ice floes, the thaw, the flood, the upstart spring. Thank God our time is now. When wrong comes up to face us till we take the longest stride of soul a man can take. Affairs are now soul-sized. The enterprise is exploration into God. Yes, I think so. So what does this exploration into God look like? What will connect us to the consciousness of unity and wholeness? One thing I'm convinced of, talking about God is not enough. There was a time I was deep into Catholic theology because I thought I would find God if I understood God. The reason I'm in unity today is that idea let me down flat. All my theological knowledge, even adherence to every rule and law, did not result in my knowing the comfort and inspiration of God's presence. Nor did these things change my life. I continued to go from one crisis to the next, one bad habit to the next, one negative feeling to the next. So I made up my mind to forget about God. I thought, perhaps God does exist up there, far away in heaven somewhere, but so what? What has God done for me lately? Today I recognize this moment as a huge turning point. It's so interesting that when I remembered it, tears came up the same way they have over the years periodically. Because I knew that unless I could find a bigger God and feel this God in my heart, I was not interested in religion at all. Though I did not understand it at the time, this was a heartfelt prayer, and evidence of God's call to come up higher. So exploration into God is not reading or hearing about someone else's God. To the contrary, it is refusal to settle for head knowledge or the beliefs of others. Exploration into God is finding ways to experience the presence of good. Life is always offering opportunities to experience good. It calls to us in beautiful moments of oneness with loved ones. It calls to us in incredible order and beauty of nature. It calls to us in every opportunity to be kind to a stranger. And it calls to us in times of pain, struggle, and confusion when we are literally brought to our knees. In quiet moments of surrender, may our souls whisper, God, absolute good and unconditional love, is the one constant presence and power in my life and in the world. Trust in the first principle brings us the blessed assurance that everything that happens has the potential to make us and our world more whole. For me, this is the so what number one when it comes to choosing unity's first principle as the foundation for our faith journey. The peace that comes from an inner sense of being surrounded by and filled with a harmonizing, benevolent presence that has only our good in mind. So what number two is the freedom to be myself, I have issues just like you, just like the world we live in. But these issues do not affect our inherent perfection and wholeness. We are made in God's image, remember? To the degree that I am connected to my authentic self, I am connected with the one good God. Therefore, I and you can have the confidence to feel at home in our own skin. So what, number 3, is this? If enough of us are able to see God in the midst of the violence and hold fast to the promise that the light will never be overtaken by the darkness, we will create a world that is kinder, wiser, and more connected. Some people say that church is becoming irrelevant these days, that there are many ways to be spiritual, they say, and I say yes, there are. But perhaps we humans are so prone to doubt and fear, we need each other to stay focused on our vision for wholeness. Yet what I do see is that the purpose of church is evolving from the propagation of old theologies to gatherings of spiritual seekers for mutual support and a sense of belonging and social connection and meaningful community service. So I ask you this morning, will you join me in this circle of love, surrounding and embracing our ailing world, trusting in the wholeness that permeates it at its core, knowing that somehow all things are working together for good. This, I believe, is the ultimate grassroots movement, and it alone will change the world. God bless you all. Oh, you are? Oh, we took it off there.
Oh, it's okay. There was some doubt as to what we were going to do around this time of meditation. And originally I was going to do Break Me Open Wide. And I did a different meditation last night. And if you guys would like to stay, maybe after the service, I'll do, and maybe if that would be okay, I'll do that again, You Are My Rose. But after your words today, I decided to stick with the original plan, which was to do Break Me Open Wide. And this is really, I was speaking to, there was a Facebook video, live video, that's one of my friends in California was doing, Sky Nelson, and he was talking about the Amazon forest and how its destruction was breaking his heart. And I reminded him that it's breaking his heart open. And I think that's what we need to live into, is breaking our hearts open wide. And so this is Break Me Open Wide. I'm also reminded with this song that of the vases that the Japanese create, where when they are fractured, they place gold in the spaces where and reconnect the vase together. And if you think about that every time that there's a fracture, every time there's one of those moments that makes our heart break open wide, that gold is coming from within the pot, from within our heart, and it's expansion, it's continuous expansion, because every crack is being replaced with gold. Yeah, move my music. So what we'll do is I'll sing the song. You can join me with the Break Me Open Wide. That's the only words that you need to know. And then as we come out of the meditation, we'll sing just with the guitar, Break Me Open Wide. so seek timeless lovers, stronger river tides, all our gently softened edges, our polished stony lines. We are barriers and mirrors, grieving drawn together, joy and beauty opened wide, losing form in one another. We love together, we love apart, we love with an ever expanding heart, growing, cracking, opening wide to release that precious gold inside. Break me open wide, 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 blowing in a gentle wind, fragile and flexible as grass. We pull the light from deep within, seek our simple somewhere task, take the foot forsaken bridge to life, our deepest wounds to heal. Another pull of golden lines, 100 veils revealed. We love together, we love apart, we love with an ever expanding heart, growing, cracking, opening wide to release the precious gold inside. Break me open wide, break me open, break me wide, break me open wide, break me open wide. You can keep singing that. Break me open wide, break me open wide. open wide to release the precious gold inside. Break me open wide. 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 Break me open wide.
As we enter into a time of stillness and silence, just declare within that nothing can disturb the calm peace of my soul. Nothing can disturb the calm peace of my soul. As we slowly begin to return our awareness to this time and space, I invite you to repeat after me. My faith is great. My faith is great. My arms are open. My mind is steady. My heart is full of love and gratitude. Thank you, God. And so it is.